המון שאלות בצ'אט ואנחנו נענה עליהן בפאנל בסוף אחרי ההרצאה הבאה שהיא ההרצאה המרכזית שלנו. אני רוצה רגע לעבור לאנגלית ואחר כך אני אחזור לעברית, אוקיי? I would like to introduce Dr. Jeffrey Bektheld, our friend and guest of honor of this webinar from Calgary, Canada. His dissertation, which was published in April 2020, was the trigger for this webinar. After reading it, I felt that every person who works as a surrogate must be familiar with his way of presenting this unique profession. Dr. Jeffrey Bektheld graduated from Capella University in the United States and is a member of the Psy-Chi International Honor Society in Psychology. He practiced positive psychology in Canada and worked as a consultant to private practitioners. He is interested in research on how language is used as a tool to reconstruct social understanding of reality. Welcome, Jeffrey. I just want to translate to Hebrew and then it will be your turn.
Yeah.
Dr. Jeffrey Bektheld, מקלגרי בקנדה, סיים את הדוקטורט שלו באוניברסיטת קפלה בארצות הברית. הוא חבר בארגון מקצועי קנדי שנקרא The Psy-Chi International Honor Society of Psychology. הוא עובד בגישת הפסיכולוגיה החיובית וכיועץ במרפאות פרטיות. תחום המחקר המרכזי שלו הוא איך השפה משמשת כלי בהבניה חברתית חדשה של המציאות. ומהזווית הזו הוא ניגש לעבודת המחקר שלו על הסרוגייט. ההרצאה ניתנת באנגלית, אבל לטובת אלה שמתקשים קצת, אני תרגמתי חלקים קטנים בשיקופיות, אז בשיקופיות יש לכם תרגום בעברית, וזה יעזור למי שזקוק לעזרה הקטנה הזאת. Please, Jeffrey, you are welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm a pleasure to be here, and I really am thankful for the invite. I've spent a lot of time with this on my own, and it's great to share it with other people. So I will just share my screen then and bring that up. Does that show up okay for everyone? Yeah, great. So I will just go through that, just make sure. Oh yes, because I have to go to my share screen. 1 second here. There we go. There we go. So I'll present with talking first just a little bit about how I came to know about surrogate partner therapy, a little bit about my research study, a practical application, and then I'll try to be brief enough that we have time for some questions and discussion. If not, and we run out of time, people are welcome to email me or feel free to contact Ronit and she can contact me on your behalf, okay? So my first exposure to surrogate partner therapy really was through Hollywood. I saw the title there in the one presentation about the sessions and the movie with Cheryl Cohen and Green. That was my first exposure to any of it. And there's also Masters of Sex. That was a television special that was a series here, and it followed the works of Masters and Johnson. So before that, though, I was working in the field of psychology for 13 years. I heard nothing about surrogate partner therapy, though. And I was amazed. I was like, how did I not know about this? I'm curious to learn more. So I ended up looking just the Google search and looking at the periodicals, magazines, blog posts. What are people talking about? And I found that there's a large disconnect between the way the movies even presented it and the way the media seemed to emphasize it. They emphasized about sex. It was about this non-committal relationship. It was about money being exchanged. There was some sort of a client's desire that was salacious for a surrogate partner. And it generally had a negative power differential view that somehow the women that were doing this were being taken advantage of, and the men who were doing it were somehow predators. And it didn't seem that that was too accurate, especially if it's employed as a therapy technique. So I was like, okay, I need to learn more about this. So I ended up looking at the scientific literature at that point, and everything pointed back to Masters and Johnson, clinical studies that they were doing, but they never published it inside of scientific journals because they felt there'd be too much retribution from society, that people weren't ready to hear about this, and that'd be a very negative view. However, people that came after them, like Elfenbaum, Cole, Dow, even Hartman and Fithian, they ended up publishing innovations of the technique, but it was still within a clinical model. And the clinical model was the only thing that seemed to be, advertised within the scientific literature. So I started to look at surrogate partners themselves. What's known about surrogate partners? And unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of information out there in the United States. There was a little bit of university research. Newnan published some stuff. Danisher also as well, that talked about how surrogate partners, how do we say that? What they did during a normal session, and just their opinions on various things. But the most up-to-date information wasn't in the United States, it was in Israel. And I was curious, well, does that translate over to here, or is it different? But we didn't really know over here because there wasn't any of that scientific literature here yet. So I did find a few articles that were self-published by surrogate partners that talked about their experience working with clients, as well as what it was like for them to go through the training to become a surrogate partner. And then there's a few articles that people talked about, if you were a clinician, what was your attitude towards it? Or if you're a graduate student, what was your attitude towards surrogate partner therapy? Would you be interested in using that in your practice in the future? However, the most, prolific information was truly in subjective sources, magazine articles, things that don't have a review process that is third party to them. So I did find some that really did try to quote and capture what the surrogate partner was saying. And I based a lot of my understanding of surrogate partner therapy based on that, as well as what I saw in Israel. So the significant problem I saw really was that there's this massive gap between what we see in the scientific literature and what we see in the media and the everyday person. People are excited about this. People are interested. People want to know more about this. But the scientific literature hasn't seemingly caught up with it. For 50 years, there's really not a whole lot of information about this technique. And as far as what they had in the International Professional Surrogates Association definition, it's really changed. It's not really a clinical model in the United States anymore. What it is a contracted clinical confederate. So a surrogate partner would then be contracted by a clinician, and maybe in their city, maybe in a different city, maybe they have to fly the client in to see them. So there wasn't that many surrogate partners either. I thought, well, that's really interesting. I think the scientific literature could probably improve upon their knowledge. And that's when I decided I was going to university anyways. I was self-funding my research, and it seemed like there wasn't a lot of people doing this, and I had an opportunity to make a contribution. So I thought this is a great way for me to get into research, as well as to hopefully make a valuable contribution, not just to the people who practice the therapy, but mainly to the people that my heart goes out to, which is the clients, the people that really do need the help. And many people have not heard of this or even know that this is a possibility. And I want to be able to help that group of people have better access. So I based my research around a very simple question. How do surrogate partners understand their experience working with sex therapy clients? I approached it as a job a person does and how it is that they see themselves doing it and what's their experience doing that. It was a qualitative research study. I used a multiple case study method, which meant that I was going to look at each individual participant before I would then go on to do them as a whole group. So it had an encompassing feel, but I wouldn't lose the detail that was relevant for each individual participant. And I also based it on, I'm just gonna give myself a little glass of water here. And I liked the acting earlier. That was I didn't really understand what was being said, but I really enjoyed it. So I based it on positive psychology's PERMA model. So it meant that I was looking for particularly how the participants viewed their work as relating to positive emotions, how they were engaging with their work, how it related to having these authentic connections, these really meaningful relationships, how it related to their sense of what they're achieving for themselves, how it's developing themselves, how it's making them feel like they're becoming better and more worthwhile in some ways, and the meaning that they were getting from this work, how it was relating to a purposeful existence. So the participants themselves, I was expecting something very different. I was expecting maybe we'd have a certain type of person who's a surrogate, and that was not the case. Surrogate partners could have been anybody, and it was a very wide group of people. So I had to go and set it down as they were going to work with someone who was a mental health professional, and I purposely seeked those people out. So they had to have at least a year of experience and been working as a surrogate partner within the past 2 years. The people that volunteered for the study only had to remove one person because they were working with a clinician that wasn't registered with any sort of professional association, had no accountability. But everyone that was in my study, they did have accountability to someone that had an overseeing group. So a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a medical doctor. All the surrogate partners worked with someone who is vetted and has responsibility to a government level. So all 10 participants, they were either cisgendered males or females. And again, they were part of that professional association within the United States. They all described having some sort of meaningful romantic relationships and various preferences in partners. And those seem to be unrelated to client referral. So meaning that you might have somebody that in their personal life, they exclusively practice homosexual relationships. They would still work as a surrogate partner though, as a heterosexual. And they said that building a relationship and building the types of skills that's part of the surrogate relationship, it wasn't required because it wasn't part of their piece of what they had to have. It was about giving to the other person. All the participants were a very large age range. You know, we had people in their 20s into their 60s. Some people were parents with small children, with adult children, some were non-parents. Everyone had some level of education. They had passed high school, had some sort of certificate, a bachelor's, a master's, even partial PhD programs. And I think this is one of the more interesting parts. All the people that were surrogate partner participants, they believed that surrogate partner therapy is more than just a job. It's a cause. It's something that's really important. The world needs to hear about it, and it has the power to change people in profound ways. And they're very excited to share their experiences because of that. So the data that I collected to form the study really comprised mostly of the interviews, but to some smaller degree, I also had artifacts. So if they presented case notes to me, journal entries, anything like that, I would put that within their case file, as well as my impressions. If I noticed something about the surrogate partner, I'd kind of jot a note, and that would be part of the research as well. However, most of it was based on the guiding questions and the interview questions that would follow from that. So I'll just kind of go through these really quick with you guys. How did you get into surrogate partner therapy work? What happens in a surrogate partner session? What is the surrogate client relationship like? What interactions do you have with the sex therapist? How do you describe the work that you do? What is most enjoyable about the work you do? What is most challenging about the work you do? What advice would you give to someone considering surrogate partner work? What does working as a surrogate partner mean to you? What does this mean for society? What do you achieve or accomplish for yourself in surrogate partner work? How do you think providing this service helps society? What are the times that you feel yourself immersed and what you're doing feels like it just flows? And all these are based directly out of the PERMA model from positive psychology, trying to get an understanding through that lens of what surrogate partners do in their job and how they understand it. And so I'll go through some examples now of what the surrogate partners were saying as part of this. What I like to say is, and this is again directly taken from the surrogate partner participants, what I like to say is we're modeling a healthy and appropriate relationship that within the carefully constructed confines and very specific compounds of the surrogate partner model. This is never meant to be sustainable. It's meant to launch a person to what is ever they wish and desire and dream for themselves in terms of a relationship. I typically see a person 9 separate sessions before we ever start taking clothes off. And it's like I think that says something. That says something really important about this is about relationship. This is about skill building. It's not about getting naked and practicing, right? All of it talks about in these both, they're trying to have this therapeutic relationship. It's one where the purpose of the relationship is to launch the client into a better life in their future. It's really important that we distinguish between our role and the role of the verbal therapist. So I would never have a complete session that involves just talking. However, there are a lot of things that I can do that a verbal therapist can't do. And one of these things is touch. We employ a lot of sensate focus in the work. The sensate focus is a great way that a safe environment through the gentle nurturing touch that the client can start to pay attention to. Physical sensations that they find pleasurable. And it also becomes a form of body image work because so many times people relate to their body by the way it looks visually as compared with idealized objects like movie stars and models. Whereas if you close your eyes and have someone touch you, you can start to experience pleasure regardless of what your body looks like, right? Regardless of whether you weigh 100 pounds or 400 pounds. And again, the focus here is that the circuit partner is trying to say that what they're doing is something very different that a clinician can do. They're practicing and they're doing stuff in real time with the client that no one else can do. And this is some more things that they're saying. I've had half anxious people where there's some component of just, overwhelming fear, like inhibitory fear. His childhood trauma was so significant. It was very difficult to move past even the rudimentary stages of touch. And this older man who suffered some pretty severe abuse in his childhood, he never really was able to experience hugs. He was sexually abused and raped by both his parents, physically tortured. Like, it's just like that level, wow, it's unbelievable. The types of concerns that people bring to surrogate partner therapy, they're significant. They're not something that, well, I'm going to try this therapy out. Many people have tried many things prior to this, and this is something that helps them move forward. And so I think it was very interesting to talk about and hearing from the participants just the type of severe concerns that many of the clients came with, because it was something that really wasn't reflected prior when I was doing my research. There are places where obviously people would be triggered because of the history of the clients that I've worked with. Some of the very first exercises, like the "May I Will You" exercise. I've had clients cry during that because they've never been able to say no and feel like that no would be respected and honored. That's part of my job then as a surrogate partner, is to let the therapist know that they, the client, have a distorted sense of what their touch might feel like, or that they have a really strong reaction to my touch on them. I try to make it as safe and relaxed and comfortable as possible, that it's okay for them to, fumble or, for things not to go exactly as planned. It's to show people like, no, it's okay. You can cry in the middle of sex. I'm still going to be here. No, you can 100% fall apart right now, and I'm going to be here. It's a very slow process to get, to the point of being naked in bed. That's basically as far as we've gotten a year. But when she first came on board, that was, pretty outside her realm of experience or something that she could ever imagine herself doing. And under the best circumstances, the therapist and the surrogate are really peers with different tools in their toolkit, and we bounce off each other. And I've been lucky enough to have some really great therapists that I work with. You need people behind you, supporting you when you're doing the work. So I've graduated to full membership, but I can still call my mentor all the time. And again, this part here, it shows how there's that collaborative relationship. It's not people just working all on their own, doing their own thing as surrogate partners, but rather surrogate partners are working together with a therapist, with other people, being supported to make sure that what they're doing has therapeutic benefit for the clients. You have to kind of handle a lot of stuff before you're ready to do this. Put yourself physically, but also emotionally into this relationship and hold the container for it, but also give yourself fully to it. To do this work, you can't fake it. You have to have an authentic relationship with these people. I have to be able to let my person, my body, all of me to be part of this therapeutic process. It really takes total commitment. And even though supposedly I'm a pro, you know, I'm still a woman in the room who is nervous about taking off her clothes for the first time in front of a partner. I know when I was interviewing the participants, I found it was amazing to hear from them just how real this relationship is. It's not that they're acting a certain way for a certain period of time with these people, but they are fully engaging their own selves with the client in a real relationship and molding it in a way that's reflexive enough and planful enough, though, to make it therapeutic. And I said to her, like, that's really turning me on. And the look on her face was amazing. It was like, you're really enjoying this? And this is the surrogate part saying, yeah. I think everything that I've been and done and the people that I've loved and the way I've engaged in relationship was part of what built a framework of who I am, who I see myself to be, and the kind of relationship skills that I have. I was practicing as a sex therapist, a traditional formal sex therapist, using a medical model of, you know, sexual dysfunction. And so it kind of talks about how there's very different backgrounds that the surrogate partners may come from to actually get into this work, and that their unique circumstances they've had have increased their ability to do this work by the knowledge they've gained. The sense, I'll come back to this idea that all of my adult life, I've been asking, what is my purpose? How do I meet this big soul purpose of this lifetime? That because this work arrived in front of me and I said, this is it. That's what I want to be doing. That's what I'm meant to be doing. Jesus, everything that's about my life has been preparing me for this. I'm really ready to be doing this, not just professionally ready, but personally, this is something I'm very capable of. And so doing that, which is my purpose, is a huge win for me. I'd say the main disappointment is not doing it more, not nearly as much of doing this work as I'd like to be doing. There's not much people that talk about their job and wishing they could do more of it. There is a tremendous amount of satisfaction that the surrogate partners had by doing this work. They loved it. It was invigorating for them and it felt so meaningful. I think it supports the idea that everyone has a right to a sexual experience and that sexual part of their life, sexuality is part of being human. It's part of the human experience. And then on that first line, like there's so many surrogate partners that talked about how as a society, much of the human sexual part of us is really devalued when it's a very basic part of our human needs. She had literally been in verbal therapy for 25 years and still found herself unable to date. So the first point I wanted to say is, you know, a lot of people have tried a lot of other things and haven't really found a way to break through. To me, it's unethical because the clinicians, will be working with some of these clients for years and the talk therapy isn't really getting anywhere. And that was something that was really stressed by a lot of the surrogate partners too, is that as clinicians, you know, the therapist, the psychiatrist, the psychologist, the medical doctor, you need to find things that are going to work for your clients. And if what you're doing isn't working, you really need to reconsider things that maybe aren't mainstream. And surrogate partner therapy might be that thing that's going to help your client. And I found this a really good summary quote from one of the participants. It's our deep craving for all of us in our human souls to have intimacy. How we look for that and where we find that is different for us, but I want to help these guys find their way into what is real intimacy for them, that they can only find by unpacking the baggage of anxiety, of shame, and self-worth issues. And I like the quote that the surrogate partner gave me here because he talks about how the clients he sees, they want that, they're hungry, they're thirsty for that, but there's something that's preventing, it's holding them back from that. And that the surrogate partner just wants to be able to free the client to be able to feel life and be a part of that in a much bigger way. So I had quotes like that, many of them, and I was spending so much time going through them. It was hard to start to say, what's the most important ideas that I need to attach myself to? What do I need to publish out of all of this? And that took a very long time for me to go through it. I spent roughly about 3 months in my data analysis stage. And I just spent the start of it saying, okay, I need to just filter that through me. So I spent a lot of time reading the transcripts. I was listening to them. I'd be driving places in my car, having on my headphones, and just really spending time to say, okay, what seems to really come up over and over again? And so after I did that a while, I began to say, okay, what are some ideas that I can start putting towards this? And I'll go in this more detail in the next slides. And what thematic ideas can I attach to their words that will begin to explain what they're saying in a more condensed way so that the rest of the world can read this and hopefully understand what surrogate partners do. After that, I also did a deductive pattern matching method, which looked at how the surrogate partners and what they said related to positive psychology and to some degree about how they flourish and have a better time working within this as well. Once I had all those themes, I then went to the surrogate partners themselves and said, does this fit for you? What I said, what I've written, does this work for you? I know there's a lot of people that have interviewed surrogate partners before and they've misappropriated what they've done, and it's only served to confuse the readers what it is that a surrogate partner does and the type of things they should be trying to take away from it. So I want to be sure that what I had really was important and it did work for them. So just to give you an example, I kind of started with my initial codes here and I says, okay, this makes sense, and I began to say, okay, do I see this in each one of my participants? And I started going across like that. And this kind of got distilled down as time went on. From there, I took all of those individual codes and began to cluster them around bigger ideas. And the first one there in the top is about altruism. So I thought, okay, the idea of altruism, what fits with that? And after a week of this, I put all this stuff to the side and I tried new words. And I tried new thematic ideas to see what I could arrange around it too. So my final ones I came up with here, I kind of came up with 6 of them. And the themes I found in the surrogate partners' work and how they felt and how they experienced it was really altruism, professionalism, a treatment not provided by clinicians, how it related to a unique calling in their life, how it meant them being authentic, and how it was very meaningful work for them. And all of these were then supported by those smaller codes that I came up with. So altruism was supported by surrogate partners do this work for their inner satisfaction. They feel good about doing this work. They want to do this work. They want to do it for the benefit of helping others. They're not motivated by financial or some sort of sexual gain. They're doing it because they're excited about that client breakthrough, the client's progress of getting better. And a lot of them talked about it's like being a parent where you care deeply about this person, but you want them to go off into the world and do good things. Professionalism came up so much through all the things the surrogate partners said. It was supported by use of therapeutically indicated interactions. They always talked about whatever they're doing in that session, they're always thinking, how is this going to help this client move forward with their life? They would often use a treatment protocol, but they would also, and pretty much all the time, have some sort of a client-specific intervention within that, something related to the specifics of the client situation and the concerns they're trying to break through. They would talk about the logistics of arranging a room, having towels ready, or having anything else that they might need for a quiet space. Maybe they're going to have coffee to start and just have that real relationship then that's based on that. So relationships were always professionally bounded. Meant that they're not going to meet with their client outside of therapy hours. They're not going to have a relationship texting them or friending them on Facebook. It's professionally bounded. It's within a certain space and a certain time frame. And after the therapy is ended, so is the relationship. There is a great deal of reflexivity that the surrogate partners had to talk about and had to work with as well, where they had to respond in time to the client's issues and the things that are coming up in session in a very meaningful way that would also help provide some sort of therapeutic benefit. And a big part, as I talked about earlier in the examples, the client concerns that people bring to this, they're clinically impacting their lives. It's not like a feel-good exercise to do surrogate partner therapy. It's life-giving for people who get treatment through this. The surrogate partners often talked about how it's so important that they're trying to build this trust. They're trying to create this safe place for the vulnerable persons. Their clients are typically way more vulnerable than the average population. And again, the goal is always orientated for the client's future relational functioning, that they can do well and go out from here. The clinician surrogate partner relationship, the idea of the surrogate partner, the clinician, is collaborative, going back and forth to help lift up the client and help them be better. They talked about being on and trying to provide their very best for the client, showing up 100% of them when they're doing this work. And all of the participants talked about as being part of a professional association and how important it was to have that professional training to do this work. It's not something you just jump into with no experience and no training. You need to have people to help mentor you through it, and you need to have instruction in it. The theme of treatment not provided by clinicians, I thought that was a very important one, because you need someone outside of the therapeutic talk relationship to do the direct modeling, directly touch clients, doing some sort of experiential exercises, as well as doing observational and direct coaching in the moment while the client is there. The theme of unique calling was supported by, there was lots of unique self-understandings that the participants talked about that had led them to the work. But a lot of people, when I was hearing this from them, they would say, I never even knew surrogate partner therapy was a thing or was even out there. But when I heard about it, I knew I could do it. And I knew not a lot of people could do it. And I saw the benefit in it. So I felt like I had to do it. I felt compelled to do it because I knew I could help people doing it. So there's some sort of a life experience that was part of their story, personally and professionally, has led them to that work. And again, not everyone can do that work. The theme of being authentic really related to, this is a very real relationship. And they're sharing themselves, a lot of themselves, and their self-perceptions, being transparent with the client. A lot of them talked about being very attached to the client too, that they'd have sadness when the therapy time was over, because they've been meeting this person once a week for the last 2-3 years, and now all of a sudden they have to say goodbye and it's over. And she said it's a bittersweet, knowing that they're going on to something and they're going to have a better relationship and they're, been treated, so to speak. But they're also a little sad because it means that the relationship's ended for them too. And they said that is really something just like a real relationship. You can't be half in it. You have to have all of yourself, be transparent, be there with the client. And as a result, you're going to be impacted by the client. When the client's talking about things that have been very hurtful or hard, or maybe things are really wonderful, you share in that celebratory time, but you're also sharing in their sorrow as well, because you have a different level of attachment. It's a closer relationship the surrogate partner has with the client. But the client relationship was also dynamic. It was one where the surrogate partner, and they first introduced, they're leading most of the therapy. They are giving a lot more instruction, but as time goes on in the relationship, it starts to kind of level out, where then the client begins to lead a lot of the sessions too, within the boundaries set before them by the clinician and the surrogate partner. A very important theme to me here was meaningful work. The surrogate partners talked about how doing this work was so important to them. It was challenging work because it required all of them. It required a lot of emotionality, but it was very meaningful because it allowed them a chance to have this advocate role, that sex is important and that you should have concern for people that have been somewhat disenfranchised by the larger groups, and that we need to take care of those types of people in whatever ways we can. If surrogate partner therapy is one of those ways, they want to do that. So they really had this concern for the influence and the impacts of different societal views, and that they believe that when they're helping a client have some sort of a sexual breakthrough, it's not just sexual. It relates to their whole life. It relates to how they can function in so many other ways. However, this one little part of their life, the sexual part of their life, has evaded everything else, and they're going to help break through that and allow this person to lift them up. There's a lot of people that they talked about that weren't able to work. They had, endless, countless small, short-term relationships that were generally abusive because they kept on looking for the wrong people. Some people were almost just shut into their houses and they couldn't really even go out and see anyone or speak to anyone. By doing this work, this allowed these people to integrate into the rest of society in such a meaningful way. It was such important work, and they said they just would celebrate every time they would see a client be able to hit that next step and be able to be part of the world in a much bigger way. And they said, this is how I help people, one person at a time. And this came back when I sent the themes back to the participants, and I said, you know, what are your thoughts? A lot of people they straight out agreed, but a lot of people said, they added emphasis. They says, okay, you need to make sure you stress this point. Many of these clients would not have the progress they had unless you had surrogate partner therapy. They needed this. This was life-giving. This was life-changing. It is ethically required. Whenever you present, you have to say that for me. So here I'm saying it today. It's a very important part of their meaningful work. And they talked about how, yeah, the empowerment, they're empowering these clients and reduce the shame that they felt. And many times that shame, in my opinion, it wasn't really the clients, it was invoked, it was pushed upon them through abuse, through societal views, through other things. So again, the main themes I found that surrogate partners have is that they're altruistic, they have this professionalism, they offer treatment that's not provided by clinicians, it's part of a unique calling to them, it's both them being authentic and it's extremely meaningful work for them. So from there, I took it back into the PERMA model from positive psychology. Positive emotions, feeling good. Yes, surrogate partners talked a lot about feeling good about the work they did. It wasn't related to anything sexual though, like the media might want you to think. It related to them helping other people and feeling so good about their clients having these breakthroughs and be able to participate in life more fully. Engagement, finding that flow, a lot of it related to them having the relationship and when that client had that trust with them and saying that's when it just started to click and it just felt like it flowed and it felt like it was easy and it was, you know, I just was able to engage with that client then. These relationships as authentic connections, you know, they talk about how having that connection with the person, having that trust, that reciprocal trust with each other was such an important part of it. You know, and I don't have this in here, but, you know, from my notes, one of the clients talked about how they're working with a client and he had a very difficult time having an erection, but when he lost his erection in the middle of having, you know, they're attempting to have sexual intercourse, the surrogate partner turned back and looked at him and he said, you know, the look that you had for me was so loving, so caring. I didn't feel defeated. I just felt fully accepted. That's what this therapy is about. It wasn't about any actions or any of the other things that are happening sexual. It was about that trust, that care, that concern for another human being that you can't do as a clinician. You can't convey that type of message where a person's in the middle of trying to do something that's very difficult for them and they're failing at it, but knowing that they're still loved 100%. No one's going anywhere and they're fully supported. I mean, wow. Meaning, purposeful existence. You know, what it means is I get an opportunity to help a woman become a whole human being. I heard that in many different ways, that what they're doing is helping people to become a lot more than where they're at today. This idea of achievement, a sense of accomplishment. Again, this is an achievement accomplishment for the surrogate partner. They didn't talk about, you know, making money or anything like that. They talked about how it made them as an individual better. They understood their relationships better. They were able to engage. They cared about society more. It made them better as a human being by doing this work. I mean, it was an absolute pleasure to talk with all of my participants and hearing the stories they had and how this work has been impactful for them. So from here, I then took all of those ideas and I found that there was like this tension between the statements that had meaning in them, as well as the statements that had achievement in them. As well, there's also some that had this relationship part and an achievement part. And so I had a combined idea where you had to have this real relationship in order for them to achieve that sense of satisfaction for themselves, that this work is meaningful. And that meaningfulness really came from taking the client from where they're at to where they're going to go. So I basically took all of that information there, which is a lot, and part of the case study methodology through Yin basically means distilling all that information in a big funnel into one really tight statement. So all the participants confirmed what I said there. Yes, that explains what I do very well. I did some minor editorial changes. They wanted to take some little pieces out that they thought are too personally identifying. and we did that for them. And then I basically took all that information, funneled it down, and I found that these were the most important pieces of the research I found. The surrogate partner work is really a calling. And it is one where you are a helping professional. You're having these authentic relationships. However, they're within this professional boundary, a certain box that you have to stay within. There's certain rules you abide by. And the intervention, it's really multifaceted, and it has to include touch. So I put that together as surrogate partners experience their work as a calling, taken with the seriousness of a helping professional who is therapeutically bonded, authentic relationships as part of a complex and dynamic intervention involving touch. So the implications for my research and the findings I had. Surrogate partners is an unregulated title. Anyone can advertise themselves that without qualification in the United States. I'm not too sure what other parts of the world. It's the same in Canada. There's no professional association that is state or government regulated. So there's a bit of a buyer beware situation. So as a clinician, if you are hiring a surrogate partner, you have to really understand that individual, where they're coming from, and how they relate to being held accountable. Ethically, I'd say that as clinicians, surrogate partners, you need to make sure that they're going to do well work for your clients, because that client vulnerability does require for you to give them extra protection. So who does this surrogate partner work with in collaboration with? Where did they receive their training? Are they endorsed by anybody? Are they part of a professional association? Those are the types of questions that I think a clinician should ask over here in the United States, particularly because we don't have clinics. We have just people who are freelancers. So the final piece here really is the practical application. What was I hoping would come out of my research? I was hoping to improve societal knowledge. I was hoping that when people hear the word surrogate partner, they start thinking something differently. So on the basis of society really has misunderstood surrogate partners and surrogate partner therapy in general. They jump to the wrong conclusions. And unfortunately, the scientific research was really needed to be improved. And I think it still could stand some improvement, so it can add to our understanding as a society. So my background I had prior to doing this research was really in discursive social constructivism. It talks about how we use language as a tool to transmit our understandings of things, as well as how we change our understandings. So the transmission of understandings, you're truly anchored though to our limitations of language, their social context. So the brief part of that, all phenomena, any sort of experience we have, we'll describe by words. Those words are somehow then encoded by somebody who had that experience, and then they're decoded by the person who's trying to understand them. However, just the way our brain works, we're going to go and take what they said and we'll use those words and start to try to filter it. Where does that fit? Does it fit like this? Does it fit here? Kind of the idea of it quacks like a duck, it looks like a duck, it waddles like a duck, it must be a duck. So this process, however, is truly biased though, because if we have no prior understandings that fit with this new idea, we're going to slot it into the wrong category. So anything that's new can easily be mistaken. So to give you an example, the media, as I said, well, my first understanding was it really emphasized sexual contact. There's this non-coupled relationship. There's this financial power exchange, and the clientele really wanted to meet the surrogate. And there's this gender bias power differential. So I would say we need to challenge those constructions because they're not very accurate. As far as sex goes, it's not always even indicated within the therapy method. And it's also a very low percentage of the treatment. As far as a non-coupled relationship, the idea is that there's somehow non-accountability. There's more accountability in surrogate partner therapy. You have a clinician that's there. You have a surrogate partner who's working with you on therapeutic exercises. As was demonstrated by what the people were telling me in my participant list, they were seeing clients for at minimum 8, 9, 10 times before they even look at taking their clothes off. I mean, there's substantially more accountability involved here. As far as the money being exchanged, surrogate partner therapy is extremely expensive. It's not something people do as an entertainment option, which again, we can challenge what the current media views are on this. The client's desire most of the clients aren't really wanting to even meet another person, be in a relationship. Their issue is that they have to confront these things. They're anxious and they're avoidant. And the client's desire is truly being directed by the clinician based on therapeutic benefit. The gender bias power differential, I think those negative, gender stereotypes don't really fit within this, because the surrogate partners always talked about, whether female or male, just they had this opportunity to care for that client. So I suggest that we look at a new construction of that. So when you go out from today, try to talk to at least 2 people about what surrogate partner therapy is. The clients, they truly have some sort of psychological or physical pain issue. Oftentimes it is severe, and this is life-giving therapy for them. These clients often lack relationship knowledge or relational support. Often they have, severely negative or just negative experiences, or just really limited experience in anything sexual. Surrogate partners, they're always going to be a trained and they're a professional team member. And they help facilitate experiential learning, something that you could never do as a clinician, a psychologist, a therapist of any sort. And you have the opportunity for a surrogate partner. They act as a coach, and surrogate partner therapy is like a cause, and they're helping confront the limited social views around sex, sexuality, and human sexuality. It's a very different type of view that you can start to construct when we start looking at surrogate partners as a helping professional. So if you do nothing else about reading anything I've done, I'd say go to page 124 of my dissertation, where you can look at all of the individual quotes that the surrogate partners provided. It'll give you a good view of what they have said about surrogate partner therapy, and it gives them a voice in it too. I really believe, especially after talking with Ronit, there's a lot of similarity between Israel and what's happening in the United States of America. Surrogate partners have a fairly universal feel to what it is that they're doing. Over here as well, there's a link I've provided to the International Professional Surrogates Association. Feel free to talk to Ronit if you'd like a copy of these slides. I'm happy to share with them. If you feel like any questions, feel free to contact me. You can also have a discussion here. I don't know how much I've taken of time. I probably talked for quite a while because I get going. But you're free to also email me if you like later, and I'm happy to respond to it as I have time. So thank you very much. I'll turn it back to you, Ronit.
Jeffrey, thank you so much. It's a joy listening to you, even better than reading the whole dissertation.